What's going on, guys? It's Tommy here. Welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be going over the iPod Touch 2nd generation. This device came out 10 years ago, which is mind-blowing to even think about. It was actually released in September of 2008. As of right now it's January, so I'd say about 9.5 years ago. Now, to give you guys a little bit of a backstory on how I actually had this, I have had this since it first came out. Maybe about a week after it came out, I purchased this device. So basically, when the first iPod Touch came out in 2007, I thought it was super badass. I was in, I believe, 7th grade technology class, and the first generation iPhone and the first generation iPod was just released, and my instructor told us we have to pick one of the new devices that came out and then write about it. So I picked the iPod Touch first generation. However, when it was first launched, I believe it was $299. Obviously, as a 7th grader, I did not have that kind of money, nor did my parents want to buy it for me. So what did I do? I ended up saving all the money my mom gave me for lunch and for my birthdays and holidays. I just saved up all that money. It took me about a year, to be honest. Anyway, so I finally went and bought the first generation iPod Touch. I had it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then one day whenever I was using this computer, actually, so this computer is actually more than 10 years old because I had this prior to getting the 2nd generation iPod Touch. Anyways, yeah, so I was using that computer and it automatically loaded up the Apple website, and I noticed that this device came out, the 2nd generation iPod Touch. Luckily, since it hadn't been 30 days, I was able to return the 1st generation iPod Touch and then swap it out for this one. It was the exactly same price, so I was literally probably one of the first people to get this iPod Touch 2nd generation. It couldn't have been longer than a week or two. I think it was actually probably a couple days after. I just don't quite remember that. So I did use the 1st generation iPod Touch for a little bit, but mainly I was using the iPod 2nd generation. I remember the big specs on this one over the 1st generation would be it had a built-in speaker, it had the App Store, and they also had an accelerometer, which just means that you're able to like move your device from side to side and it'll pick that up in game, like in a racing game or something like that. So it was pretty top notch at the time. But yeah, that's basically my story on how I got this. So I have had this for almost 10 years now. This device is running iOS 4.2.1, which is the highest version available on this 2nd generation iPod Touch. So I'll be going over just basically the whole iOS, just the main things, things that work, things that don't even work anymore. But other than that, let's get right into the video. Alright guys, so here we are with iPod Touch 2nd generation. On the back, you first notice that it has the Wi-Fi patch. This would help it connect to Wi-Fi. Back then, all the iPods had Chrome backing. As you guys see, it was very easy to scratch. Loads and loads of scratches. This was basically unavoidable back then. And then we also do have the Apple logo itself, as well as the iPod text. And then we have the storage size on the bottom, which in this case, it is 16 gigabytes. And then on the other side, we have the screen itself with the home button. I do have a couple cracks right over here. This is a 3.5-inch screen. On the left side, we have some volume buttons up and down, and then on the top, we have the power button. On the right side, we have nothing, and then on the bottom, we have the charging port, as well as the headphone jack. So we're gonna go ahead and do a quick size comparison with a couple iPhones that I have. First up, we'll compare it to the iPhone 5S, so you guys can see the difference. Just a bit smaller, nothing too crazy. And now we'll go with, well, we'll go ahead and go with iPhone 10 actually. So here's the iPhone 10. This one you can tell a lot more that the iPhone 10 is quite a bit bigger. And then comparing to the iPhone 7 Plus, you can see a huge difference. The iPod is much smaller. Anyways, let's go ahead and power this bitch on. So we'll go ahead and enter the password and we're in. So back then, a lot of people got the iPod Touch instead of the iPhone because they didn't want to have a contract with AT&T, which was the only carrier that supported the iPhone. And the iPod Touch basically did everything the iPhone did except text and call, as well as it doesn't have a camera. So those are the only 3 things that the iPod Touch didn't do compared to the iPhone. And you didn't have to have an AT&T plan. That is why the iPod Touch was so popular back then and really just stole the iPhone's light. Don't get me wrong, the iPhone was huge still back then. However, the iPod Touch was selling very well because of those reasons. This device is running iOS 4.2.1, which means basically all the apps in the App Store cannot be installed because of how old this iOS firmware is. I tried to download probably at least 10 apps and I failed in all of those attempts. I even went to Google and typed typed in apps for 4.2.1 and I could not find any that work. So if you do know any, feel free to let me know in the comments below. As I mentioned before, this iPod does have a built-in speaker. This is the first iPod with a built-in speaker. The first generation iPod Touch did not have a speaker or volume rockers. I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys how loud this iPod Touch speaker is, which is not very loud at all. We're going to go ahead and play a song real quick at full volume so you guys can get a taste of how loud it actually is. We'll go ahead and fast forward it a little bit. So that's like a really quick test, but it's not very loud at all. Another thing that I want to mention is this iPod Touch does not support multitasking. It doesn't have a control center as well. If you press the home button twice, you'll just get music controls. So in order for you to get the actual music controls, you have to be playing a song in the background. So I'll go ahead and double tap, and there you guys can see the music controls showed up. So you only have a couple options here. So we're gonna go ahead and close. So we don't have any control center, no notifications. Very, very basic device in today's standards. By the way, guys, I will have a link in the description below if you guys are interested in purchasing this device for whatever reason. I believe it's around $30 or $40 on Amazon, so I'll have a link in the description below. Anyways, having said that, you aren't able to actually even have any wallpapers on the back, which is quite odd. I'm pretty sure Apple could have had that available if they really wanted to. I'm sure this device could have handled that. Another thing to mention is the YouTube app. This is the old school YouTube app. It actually doesn't even work anymore. If I tried to go into it, it wouldn't let me play any music. It doesn't let me search anything. Let me see. Let me try to just search up. I'm just gonna search up gun. And I should get a pop-up saying YouTube not available. So yeah, the YouTube app doesn't work. However, I did test if YouTube in Safari works, and it does work. So we're gonna go ahead and refresh the page. It does take quite a bit of time to load a Safari page, which I don't remember having issues with that when I first got this device. At the same time, we do have different standards from today than 10 years ago, but still, I didn't remember it being this slow. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and try to play the video, and you can only watch this in 360p, I believe is the highest resolution. So as you guys can see, it actually ended up playing the video. This is one of my older videos, but here you can see the video controls. So it does play YouTube in the Safari app, which is pretty cool. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but it obviously does. On the top, you can see the old school Safari, the little Google search right here on the top as well. We'll go ahead and exit out of that. So now we do also have Facebook. This doesn't work either. I've tried it. It does load. However, you aren't able to load the feed. You can only see a couple messages. So basically, it doesn't work. I'll just show you guys real quick that I am running 4.2.1. So we'll go ahead and go into general. Go to about, and then scroll down. So there it is, 4.2.1, which is the highest firmware you can run on the iPod Touch 2nd generation. If you go through these settings as well, there's not very much compared to how it looks like now. Very minimal things you could do to the iPod Touch. This iPod is great if you're basically just going to listen to music with it and do minor things like use the calculator or the alarm. Maybe do a couple basic searches on the internet when you are connected to Wi-Fi, writing notes, checking the weather, maps, things like that is all great for. However, you're not going to have support with any apps, games, or anything like that. It also doesn't take pictures, so that's another thing to think about before purchasing this. So all in all, this is a great iPod, solely an iPod, and it's great for the person who probably already has an iPhone and just wants to pay a little bit of money for something that will play music. As I mentioned before, the headphone jack itself does come through. So if you have a car maybe that just has an aux cord or something like that, and it'll make it easier for you to play music, then this would be the device for you. But having said that, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll also have the link to purchase this device in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.